Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Borman. The Monroe County Council and Monroe County Commissioners held a joint meeting on August 3rd. First, Baker Tilly manager Jennifer Carmack reported on general requirements of the American Rescue Plan Act state fiscal recovery funds.
We have been asked to go over some of the general requirements of the fiscal recovery funds. So that's what we're going to do. And certainly, if you have questions as we go through this information, just stop us and we can discuss anything that you would like to. We're going to talk about the timeline for spending the funds, and then also just some general uses that are allowable of the funds. So Chris is going to talk about the general uses, but I'm first going to go through just the general requirements on the timeline for spending. And then just some general information on the different types of payments as far as who can benefit from those payments and a little bit of a description on that. So it's a little bit out of order on what's on the agenda, but we're going to cover everything just a little bit different order on that. So to get started, one of the things that we've been asked to discuss is the time frame in which the money can be obligated versus spent. So the requirement is that the obligation for this money occurs prior or by December 31st of 2024. So the feds define obligation as orders placed for property and services, contracts and subawards, and similar transactions that require payment. So essentially, there has to be a legal obligation to make this payment, and that legal obligation has to be in place by December 31st of 2024. Now, they do offer the 2-year period after that, so up to December 31st of 2026 to actually spend the funds.
Next, Mary Morgan gave an update on Heading Home, which receives ARPA funding.
By many of you that are in this picture. This is from November 2021. The idea was to create systemic changes for people who were seriously impacted and adversely affected by the pandemic, and to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-repeating for the region that we're in, which is Region 10 of the South Central Housing Network. That includes Monroe County, but also Morgan, Owen, Lawrence, Green, and Martin. So the county provided funding for us, as well as the city of Bloomington and others. And for that, we are very appreciative.
Morgan also shared information on the Landlord Risk Mitigation Fund.
The Landlord Risk Mitigation Fund is another strategy. This is something that we're partnering with from the Bloomington Housing Authority. They received funding to stand up this program within the city limits. And we are helping them expand so that it can also be used in the rest of Monroe County outside of the city of Bloomington. And this is really an insurance policy for landlords. So if a landlord is reluctant to rent to a tenant for a variety of reasons, this fund will say, okay, first of all, we have an education program that's going to help tenants be better tenants, but also if something happens and you have damages to your units that exceed the deposit, you'll have a backup that can help pay for those damages. Commissioner
Penny Giffens highlighted the work Heading Home has done to secure housing for veterans.
I just want to point out to the public that one of the things that Heading Home has done is they've been targeting specific subpopulations to house, and through the work that Mary and Todd, sorry, I'm choking them, through the work that they've done, they've housed 16 veterans so far this year, and I think that's quite an accomplishment.
The commissioners and council discussed additional projects that may be eligible for ARPA funding and agreed to meet again in the near future to continue the discussion. At the Bloomington City Council meeting on August 2nd, Operations Manager for the Department of Public Works, Michael Large, presented on the city's increased solid waste disposal and recycling processing fees.
So the increased solid waste disposal and recycling processing fees continue to increase year to year. Increased fees for recycling, processing, and solid waste disposal, combined with the increased tonnages, have resulted in overall increased disposal and processing costs from 2017 through 2022. In addition, increased operational costs associated to supply costs, fuel costs, vehicle maintenance costs, and utilities have been ongoing and absorbed on an annual basis at the expense of capital replacement. Not keeping up with needed investment on capital asset replacement for trucks. Instead of one truck purchased for replacement each year, we have only been able to purchase one every other year. Given the heavy-duty use of these vehicles, sanitation trucks should be on a 7-year replacement cycle. And we are currently on a 10 to 12-year cycle, which will only exacerbate maintenance costs over the course of time.
Large then explained the need to adjust the service fees.
Given the rising cost of operations, rates need to be adjusted quite simply to meet operational costs and to properly invest in our capital replacement of vehicles. After the 2023 budget hearings, the administration heard from several council members that were interested in exploring a reduction of the amount of general fund support to the Sanitation Division of Public Works. As you can see from this chart, that amount that has been supported by the general fund has hovered right around $1 million since 2018, with a high of $1.107 million in 2022. Working with council members after the most recent conversation in June, we have now provided this new model here that consistently places price per gallon evenly, equitably across the board from year to year. And once again, increasing the amount of time from 3 years to a 6-year period of the reduction of the subsidy. Finally, the proposed adjust fees include additional pickups. It's quite simply just doubling of those prices, in addition to an increase in what we charge for large item and appliance pickups.
The council moved to postpone Ordinance 23-15, and that motion passed unanimously. The board will take the ordinance up again at their next meeting. At their August 1st meeting, the Bloomington Board of Public Works approved a noise permit for the Lotus World Music and Arts Festival's event, Lotus in the Park. Director of Public Works, Adam Wason, shared more details about the noise permit request.
Very similar footprint to years past with Lotus. They were also going to be doing an arts village, which they have removed that as part of the application. As we kind of saw in the application packet, it does list the start and end times for the festival being Thursday evening through Sunday. I've emailed Jillian Campbell, their engagement director, to let them know that we do have the end times as usual for Lotus at midnight, and that the resolution and the approval tonight, if the board would approve it, would include that midnight hard stop each evening, as they've done in years past. So
later, the board approved a noise permit request from the City of Bloomington Utilities for nighttime construction on Fountain Drive. Assistant Director of Utilities, James Hall, presented the request.
Hi, James Hall, City of Bloomington Utilities. We're requesting a noise variance for a water main replacement and relocation up on Fountain Drive between Crescent and Gray Street. The north end of the project will actually end at Bender Lumber's main headquarters there. We're going to be performing this work at night. There's a lot of industrial trucks and other things that come through there off 11th Street and JB Salvage and HFI, and we just figure we would hinder the least amount of people if we perform this work at night. We're hoping to start the work this Sunday and be completed by Friday afternoon. We would close the road down during the nighttime from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then we would have the road ready to be passage on at 6 a.m. again every morning. But we will be using excavators and other heavy equipment, very similar to the project we did a month ago down just north of Kirkwood.
At the last Board of Public Works meeting, the board tabled a discussion on a sidewalk closure at 2038 North Walnut Street. Engineering Department Public Improvements Manager Maria McCormick updated the board on that closure request.
Hi, Maria McCormick from Engineering Department. This is a petition that was tabled at last week's meeting for 2038 North Walnut Street. This is a new building that's going in on that parcel. We have since talked with the contractor. They will be keeping the sidewalk open until they get to the point of having to do their street cuts, at which time they'll come back to the board for a closure request. They'll do that work with the sidewalk closed as limited a time as possible. And then we will have the sidewalk open for the most of the duration of the project as a covered walkway or a protected sidewalk. We just wanted to give you guys an update since it was tabled last week and we pulled that petition. We will be bringing back a petition for when they start to do when they're doing the footers and some of the grading. They will need to have the sidewalk closed just because they will be working so closely to it. But for the majority of the project, the sidewalk will remain open and be a covered, protected sidewalk.
The Bloomington Board of Public Works will meet again on August 15th. At the Bloomington Utilities Service Board meeting on August 3rd, project coordinator Brian Blake requested approval of a land sale. Blake explained that Monroe County would like to purchase a small amount of acreage for an upcoming project.
What we're looking at here is the county has a project on Roar Road. CBU has a parcel that is affected by that project. It's rebuilding a bridge. They want to acquire a small piece of that parcel to complete their project. It's very small. It's 0.0, I think it's 200ths of an acre, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a small piece of that parcel, and it really doesn't affect anything that we would do with it in the future by allowing them to go through with this. That's it in a nutshell. Do you have any questions?
Value is $650, is that correct?
That is what they've come up with. Well, it's such a small piece.
Yeah.
I think the math comes out to about roughly 900 square feet, so it's a really small piece. They did provide an appraisal, which should have been forwarded to you.
A motion to approve the property sale passed unanimously. The Monroe County Justice Fiscal Advisory Committee met on July 31st. At the meeting, the committee discussed investments the County Council can make to reduce the number of community members entering the justice system.
One of the biggest things that I think about is when we talk about diversion, I think we have to get to the root of the problem. We cannot, one of the 12 steps of trying to solve a problem is get into the root of it. And so I found this quote that was really interesting. And so it says, when solving problems, dig at the roots instead of hacking at the leaves. And I think that is really something that we're trying to do, whether it's unintentional. All of us are trying to find a solution to the problem, but we really have to get to the core root of what that particular problem is. So, as I had mentioned before, what are the issues and concerns? And the Eve Hill report, it was composed of lots of groups and organizations, a lot of social service programs, Monroe County government. This was done a few years ago prior to the administration of the Marte Sheriff administration. And so there were lots of different things that were discussed. Lots of people were interviewed, and this is some of the things that were followed. Participants felt that our jail had shifted costs to inmates for various supplies, programming, medication, and it also disparately negatively affected inmates with mental illness and substance use disorder. And we also know in that report too that 75 and 80% of our inmates housed in our jail have mental illness disorder or substance use disorder. Another thing is participants also identified that prejudice against and assumptions about, can't see my screen here, about individuals with SUD as well as systemic racism have led the public health and criminal justice system to emphasize criminalization and fail to prioritize treatment. Participants were also concerned that despite the growing evidence that mental illness and SUD are treatable health conditions and not character flaws or serious threats to public safety, the justice system continues to focus on punitive responses to these conditions. Next, our county has implicit structural barriers such as high market rents, limited public transportation, and limited employment options. And what was also found as well, and we've also talked about several times in various meetings here, is some of our groups and social service organizations work in silos. We all have the same goal. We all want to help all of our community members. We definitely want to make sure that folks don't have to go back and continue to go back into the system. However, it seems to be that certain groups and organizations, whether it is implicit or explicit, work in silos and not really together.
Committee member Jennifer Crossley discussed possible solutions for reducing the number of people entering the county's justice system.
What can we do? And this is the conversation that brings us to now. We, again, County Council has a fiscal responsibility, and we have heard through various presentations and other conversations, whether we all have had conversations with individuals with programs or just in general. We know that in Monroe County and in Bloomington that we have a desperate and desired need for more housing, more supportive housing. And supportive housing could be more of a single housing or a family unit, but that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to terms and conditions of treatment or a way of out of incarceration. Transitional housing, we heard that many different times, that we are trying to, as people are trying to come out and go back into the world here and in our community, they need help. They have to have that transitional housing. And emergency housing, we saw that with the COVID-19 pandemic, where we did not have that housing that was readily available, and how that is a desperate need and how that is definitely still a need now.
Crossley also proposed solutions such as supportive employment, family and peer support groups, and investing in community groups and organizations. Next, Centerstone Adult and Family Services gave a presentation discussing their work in intervention services, addiction prevention, and psychiatric care.
So what is the Stride Center? It's a safe place for people to go, regardless of whether they have mental health or substance, 24/7 for 18 and older, can stay up to 23 hours. Accessed by anybody, anytime. We don't turn anyone away unless we need to send them to the hospital medically or there's some threat of violence on their part. But we have a no turn away policy, staffed by our crisis care staff and peers, focus on de-escalation, harm reduction, and care connection. Also in support with our mobile response team. We have a mobile crisis team now that's available. And much of this is new since Eve Hill did her report 3 years ago. So almost all of this is new. Supported also by our rapid response treatment team, which I won't have time to talk about, but there's a slide on that in the presentation. And we accept all referrals and require no assessment. And again, that's big because that's part of the reason why there's no crisis infrastructure. Is the only way for a mental health provider to bill a client has been you have to do an intake. And if an intake is required, then that means lots of paperwork. It means asking lots of questions, getting lots of information. And if a person's in crisis, that is just not reality. Next slide, please. So basically, if you just look at, this is a picture of, kind of the Stride Center living room. We're right across the street from Showers Plaza at City Hall. And again, the purpose is to de-escalate, rest and detox. We have a lot of people who come in under the influence, not a problem. Worked very closely with the prosecutor's office when we first started, and I think there were probably about a dozen charges where it said you can just automatically divert those individuals. And again, the purpose of Intercept Zero is to prevent people from actually having to come in contact with law enforcement. So if you have an alternative of a place to go, and again, with mobile crisis, you have somebody who can go out and meet with those individuals, it really is a way to prevent people from having to get into the system to begin with. Engaging with peer and crisis staff, assessing what they need and want. That's a really important part, because oftentimes we look at these individuals who are in crisis and we think they need treatment. Well, what if they don't want treatment, right? Oftentimes that may not be the case. And what you'll see with some of the data is a lot of the people who are coming to see us have lots of different problems. And when they come, the first thing they're really interested in is housing. I need a safe place to go. Food. Employment. So you have to be very, very focused on what they're motivated about. And again, what we'll see with the data is people come back again and again because they get their needs met, and then they want to follow up. And oftentimes it's to address their mental health or substance some point later on. Connect with resources and care. That's huge. And you talked about the silos. We partner with anybody and everybody. We do so much in terms of getting people into, whether it's an acute care hospital, substance residential, person who overdosed. We actually had one over the weekend where that individual on a Friday wanted to get into substance residential, couldn't get in right away, could get in something middle of the night on Saturday morning, and we're able to provide transportation and get that person to that location immediately. So having that sort of on-demand resources, and again, working with a whole plethora of resources has been really amazing. So,
the committee also heard from Marilyn Grimes with Courage to Change Sober Living.
Right, so you basically asked me some questions when you sent me. So I think I gave you sheets. She's got them. The answer, but I'll tell you. You asked what services Courage to Change Sober Living currently offers. Basically, we're a low barrier, affordable, peer and staff supported transitional housing to those suffering from substance misuse. And we have 2 women's houses and 2 men's houses at this point. We have 26 clients. We are in the midst of adding 10 more men's beds, which is really needed because we find that there is more men in need than there are women. So our houses include a case manager for the men and a case manager for the women. And they have curfews. We do drug testing. Yeah. There you go. Okay. So I was saying about the houses. We have case managers for men and women. And they're monitored, although we don't have live-in staff. We do have house meetings, and they have to go to 3 meetings a week, do chores, they're assigned chores, and they have to have a job within 2 weeks of coming to us. We're really strict about that because that's part of the structure of getting back on your feet. And then we do have a new software so that we actually can GPS their meetings and their housing. So when they check in and out of the house, we know they're there because we do have curfews, which are 11 through the week and midnight on the weekend. And then it also GPSs the 12-step meetings, which are a requirement, which helps them to be accountable and us keep track of, that many people. You ask, how are these services currently funded? We're funded through grants. We apply for as many grants as we can. Bobby does, our treasurer. We also are funded through Sober Joe Coffee. So he sells coffee, and then he gives us the funds he makes to use for housing, mostly for the clients if they need help. Our residents also pay rent. Our rent is $575 a month, which is really low considering you know, it's everything except for the food. They do have to take care of their own food, but that includes Wi-Fi, and we have a computer in the houses. All their bedding we will supply. They all have washer and dryers. So these are nice houses in different neighborhoods, just so you know. We rent houses, which is really makes it difficult, but the other thing is we're in different neighborhoods. So we have good neighbor policies. I have to throw this in, sorry, because I'm really proud of it. Because instead of going, you know, they're just learning how to live in a regular setting. Like, we have one house in Highland Village. We have one on South Rogers. The neighbors don't know we're sober living. We don't advertise it.
During public comment, Monroe County resident Denny Wise shared their disapproval with the possible construction of a larger county jail.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I will try to keep my remarks brief. I'm a citizen of Monroe County. In my opinion, the biggest thing that we can do to divert people from jail is not to build a bigger one. This spring, the county council published a memo stating that it would consider funding a jail with a bed size of up to 400 beds. Given that the jail population has consistently been under 200 this year, I've been wondering why the county is planning on doubling the number of people incarcerated. As a member of the public, I'm confused by the county's simultaneous commitment to incarcerating fewer people and to building a larger jail. It seems to me that we're going to have to choose between these two futures. Either more people are going to be incarcerated or fewer. We should build for the future that we want to create, and I believe that we are all here to want a future in which fewer people are incarcerated. So it would be good if we could set some goals for ourselves and hold ourselves to them. Given that a new jail will take approximately 5 years to build, how much do you think we can reduce the jail population by then? By 10%, 15%, 20%? If the county really and truly means to reduce the jail population, which is the whole point of diversion, why are you planning for an expansion? Why are we planning to invest vital resources in infrastructure that at best will be left unused, and at worst will be used to incarcerate more people than we currently are? When it comes to jails, extra space is not a good thing because it will get filled. In the words of former jail commander Sam Crow, quote, "If we build a bigger jail, kind of like building dreams, if you build it, they are going to fill it," end quote. It is contradictory to sit here and talk about diversion while planning a jail built on the pod system of indefinite expansion. We don't want pods, we don't want a bigger jail, and we don't have to go to a jail campus to get mental health care. Thank you very much.
The Justice Fiscal Advisory Committee will meet again on August 7th. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.